It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Was thinking about Adam Smith today. A little of the book learning I have done a long time ago. The thought popped into my head about conspiracy theories, about monopoly, about corporate America or corporations in general, sticking it to the little guy. And that quote goes, people of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment or diversion. But the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices. And yeah, I mean, the goal there is maximum profits, minimum costs, hooray for me, screw you. And look, the fact that we have monopoly in this country, where the vast majority of the industries are owned by a handful of companies. You look at meat processing, beef processing. There are like 4 companies that control 85% of the market. You look at fertilizer. There's like more than 3/4 of the market controlled by these 4 companies. Grocery sales, four big companies, almost 70%. And you can go down the line, cereal production, a handful of companies. All of this, everything that we consume now, that idea of free market capitalism and competition and all of that kind of gone by the wayside. And you wonder why prices are so high. You wonder why corporate America can get away with price gouging, because where are you going to go? And I've kind of bumped into something of a monopoly here in my state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's a regulated monopoly, but monopoly nonetheless. My daughter, who lives in a house that we own, got a bill from the gas company. And this is one of those things where you go, this would be devastating to working class families. And I'm gonna set this up as, I grew up a poor kid in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. My mother was in and out of employment because the 70s were not friendly to single mothers. So last hired, first fired. We were on and off welfare. Money was always tight. There was never a month where we got to the end of the month and said, gee, we've got extra. That never happened. We were at the margin every single month. And if something went wrong, one minor trip, one minor oops, that one minor rounding error, it was catastrophe for the family. And I understand, now it's even worse than it was back then, as inequality has grown massively in my lifetime. And again, we don't have the kind of push to end that I would like to see. But I'm couching this in terms that lay this out where my mindset is. Because I'm thinking of people like my mother who worked their behind off to try and to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, clothes on my back. All of those things that parents fight every day to do. And the struggle, very real. So to have something that, an unforced error, come and blow that all up, it has made me angry. So here's what happened. My daughter gets a bill from the gas company, says, we replaced your meter a couple of months ago. And we've decided that the meter wasn't functioning properly and that you owe us another almost $1,600 because we've gone back more than 2 years and we've estimated your bill on what we think you should have been using. And now you're going to have to pay that. Now, I've had people say, well, if you used it, I'm going, I understand if you used it, you should pay for it. But here's what I don't get. Over 2 years, they sent a bill and said, this is what you used this month. Please pay this amount. And she did diligently every month. Month after month after month. Now we want this additional massive sum. And I couldn't help but think of my mother. Because look, my daughter is going to be fine. Understand. She's got a support network, a backstop. Here I am. And $1,500, while it would suck to have to pay, I can do that. But I think about the millions of people who can't. I think about my mother, who no way could have, this would have potentially created a homelessness kind of situation. When you look at, this is, over a month's pay. So I got angry about it. I called my friend who's a state rep, and we went through all these different channels. We've filed a complaint with the PUC after talking with the company, who was less than helpful. The PUC took the Pennsylvania Utility Commission, because the gas companies in this state are regulated, and we're going to go through a process. And this is where my hope is, and I'll come back and I'll share this down the road. My hope is that this is going to be a government agency who's going to go, we're going to stand up for the little guy or the little girl, gal, and not monopoly power. It's not sounding like that initially, because what they told me is, I said, it seems unreasonable to go back to over 2 years and to guesstimate what maybe we think you might have owed us, and then to demand that. And she said, well, they have the right to go back 5. And I'm going, man, can you imagine what kind of crisis that would cause for a family? Now, like I said, my daughter's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. We'll be okay. The reason I bring this up is I'm thinking of the millions of people out there who this would not be okay. And sorry, a monthly payment plan for the next year, 2, 5, 10, that's not going to be helpful, because these are folks like my daughter who every penny is allocated for what she's using. Now, had she gotten a big bill 2.5 years ago and said, oh, wow, I'm using more than I should, she would have cut consumption. Because that's what happened right when she moved in. The first month was a cold month. Got that big bill, said, uh-oh, better cut back. Bought an electric blanket, turned the heat down. What families sadly have to do, have to tighten the belt to the point to where there's no more room to tighten. And this is where I feel the anger. This is where I feel I get what people are saying, especially about inflation and this monopoly power where we feel helpless. And I come back to, how often does this happen? Where an organization gets to go, well, we gave you a service, we billed you for it, you paid it. The next month we billed you for a service, you paid it. The next month we billed you, you paid it. And now 2.5 years later, we're going to go, well, you didn't pay us enough. And we want retroactively for you to pay something that we're estimating potentially could have been what you owed. And this is where I think there has to be legislation to limit the amount of time. 2.5 years is crazy. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, something along that. Because ultimately, isn't their job to make sure that their equipment functions properly? And then, wouldn't this be a place where you go, maybe we need more employees to regularly check the health of our equipment so that we don't put this burden on the backs of workers and their families? Because again, let me reiterate. My daughter's going to be fine. But there are millions of people who don't have me as a backstop, who don't have family, who don't have, who look, quite frankly, their backstop is in trouble. And this is where I come back to, what kind of a government do we want? Do we want a government that's going to side with working people or corporate power? And for me, this is one of those issues. It's a which side are you on issue. And this is where my mind goes, where government can be helpful. Because understand, when corporations have power, what do? They look out for themselves. They look out for their interests, which are profits. When working people, when they're looking out for themselves, they're looking for fairness. They're looking for consistency and justice. Look, my daughter said, I don't know if I used all of this. I don't know if I used what they said. They don't either. She said, look, if I used it, I'll pay it. But I don't know that I did. And they don't know that I did. So we'll see what the Pennsylvania Utility Commission comes out with, and I will report back. But for me, it's this power, because we can't go anywhere else. There's no other gas company you can flow that gas through those pipes in. So stuck in this moment. And if she doesn't pay it, they shut it off. So come wintertime, she's going to freeze. It's that kind of monopoly power. That kind of, well, you're going to pay us what we demand, or you're going to suffer consequences beyond reality, that I think we should probably maybe not be all that thrilled with. So I'm curious, anybody out there have dealt with this kind of a scenario? And what do you think? Is it reasonable for a corporation to say, hey, we made a mistake, and now we're going to come back and you're going to have to make it right for an extended period of time? Or is it what my first instinct is, well, it's on the outside of the house. It was your equipment. Sounds like a you problem, because anything inside the house is a me problem that I most certainly would be responsible for. So I guess we'll see where this goes. But again, that kind of outweighed power is something that we use our government to restrain a little bit, which is why, understand, Lena Khan, the Federal Trade Commission, why they're trying to oust her. Because she's trying to rein in monopoly power. She's trying to add a little competition back to an economy, quite frankly, that corporate America is very thrilled with, because they're robbing us blind at every turn. And while this may be just something very small, it's indicative of a larger system, and a larger system that is, quite frankly, stacked against working people. I want to hear your thoughts. Anything? Has this ever happened to you? You know somebody? Want to hear it? Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Maya Rudolph is evidently making a return to Saturday Night Live. So we're going to get a lot of Kamala Harris skits, as Maya Rudolph has been the Kamala Harris stand-in. Especially as the campaign gets into full gear, we should see some hilarity between, especially what's going to be the dynamic between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. There's a lot of ground for comic fodder. Some of that being, I don't know if anyone saw I saw bits and pieces of Donald Trump's interview at the National Association of Black Journalists convention, and where Donald Trump said that Kamala Harris just happened to turn black and now wants to be known as black. Evidently, according to him, she always wanted to be Indian. And now she wants to be black. And is that something you really should be saying? But here again, he went as far as to say that he is the greatest president for blacks since Abraham Lincoln. And we'll see how the black community responds to that. The room, a mixture of hysterical laughter and a spattering of applause. We will see. Because the one thing I got to tell you, I give Trump credit for. He went into hostile territory, and he, as bad as he looked, he still went. And this is what I keep telling my liberal friends, that you have to talk to the other side, even if they're not listening. You have to go in there and fight the good fight. and attempt to change hearts and minds. I'm all in favor of that. But didn't look great. Didn't look great for him. Not great. Now, Politico had a comment that I found very interesting and one that I'm hopeful on, because I'm looking at the dynamic of Trump and Kamala Harris and what a debate, if whatever happens, because I guess Trump is kind of run away. And I love the fact that in Atlanta, Kamala Harris came out and said, "You got a lot to say about me. Bring it on, big boy. Say it to my face." And I thought that was the kind of aggressive that I think she's going to need to have. And she's been, fabulous so far. These first several days, I think, have done virtually everything right. So right, in fact, that the last 2 days, the right-wing, crazy fear has been sending me emails saying, the honeymoon with Kamala is over. The honeymoon's over, like they want it to be. It's not. Clearly, it's not. She is introducing herself to the country, and interestingly enough, the country likes her. So all of this stuff of trying to paint her as, well, she's not really black, or, the whole, what was it? She sleeps her way to the top, that kind of shaming, or, lazy, and all of those tropes, it hasn't landed because the polling's pretty clear, and she's pulling ahead in this honeymoon stage, and that's kind of sending them reeling. Now, Politico had a comment that I'm thrilled with. Because if you've listened to this show, you know that I keep saying that Democrats have been too timid, too weak, too ineffective in areas that they should be rolling up their digits and getting in there on a policy front, not in an actual literal sense, but in a policy front, getting in there and mixing it up a bit. In a street fight, don't offer to hold my suit coat. Get in there and mix it up a bit. Been my thought. Now, Politico has said there are small signs that if elected president, Harris would prioritize the issue of the Supreme Court that Biden had put forth more forcefully than Biden ever has. And I'm hoping that extrapolates to a whole bunch of other things, because I've been saying for years, Democrats, good ideas, good intentions, good wants, little short on the bold, visionary, aggressive kind of policy that someone like me would want to see. For instance, it has been 15 years since we raised the minimum wage. And even when we did raise the minimum wage, it was to a reasonable rate. We don't want to make it too much, because we were told it's going to cost jobs and it's going to put people out of business. Can't ask for too much. Even today we hear it. If you ask for too much, they'll automate. Well, they're going to automate anyway. How about we make these living wage jobs for people to be able to not have to go to government and beg for assistance? If you work for a living, food stamps should not be something you're asking for. Your paycheck should put food on the table. So my hope is that by having a more aggressive, a younger president, a Gen Xer like me, who, kind of doesn't really care what people think and just wants to get stuff done, that maybe she's going to, push a little bit. She's going to demand a little bit. And they're going to call her names. And as a Gen Xer, she's not going to care, not even a little bit. And that's my hope, because there's so many things that we should be doing. The reality is, outside of the minimum wage, which again hasn't been raised in 15 years. How disgraceful is that? And I know I've had people say, but Rick, no one's paying that. Not now. Understand, as the economy tightens and corporate profits, start to come down a little bit, the first thing that corporate America is going to do is go, hey, how much are you paying your people? How much are you paying your people? We can lower that. We can hold that down. We can tap that down. Because you got to maximize profits, right? And the workers again get squeezed. This is not new. They've been doing this since the beginning of time, but this is just the latest iteration of it. I've said for years, I would love to see a Democratic president, and Joe Biden has been very, very good on the labor issue, But I would love to see a Democratic president really pick up the mantle of workers being able to organize and move forward on it. I've told the story a number of times of meeting President Obama, candidate Obama, twice. Shook his hand twice. And both times he looked me in the eye, told me we're going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. And they put zero legislative effort into making that reality. As bad as I think that law would have been, it was a compromise bill that, oddly enough, George Miller, the Democrat from California, thought that George W. Bush would sign. Not something that a Democratic president would sign. When that came around, I'm like, well, scrap EFCA, which just made it easier to demand an election, made the possibility of bypassing an election by having enough support to happen, and having some first contract arbitration in there. Oh, and tripling the fines for illegally firing somebody, putting some teeth in the law. That's it. There are a lot of other things we should be doing, but that was all that was. It was very middle of the road, compromisey kind of stuff that would have hopefully possibly gotten bipartisan support. It wasn't a full repeal of Taft-Hartley. It wasn't, going back to allowing secondary boycotts and secondary strikes. And it wasn't none of that. There's no imposing a contract if corporations, don't bargain in good faith. None of that. They could have. They could have been very bold, and they could have pushed for it, but they didn't. Because they don't. I mean, you think about the Affordable Care Act. We got the Affordable Care Act, and that's great. But it left a lot of people out, and all it really, really did was, while getting people insurance, it fattened the bottom lines of profiteers. Now, there were some things in there, and we can argue back and forth, but it could have been much more visionary. It could have been bolder. And I know, Rick, it was what we were going to get. You can't hold out for the perfect when you've got the possible, and I get that. But you had big support. You think about where I started today talking about, the fact that income inequality in this country is near record levels. We're right back to the Gilded Age. And I know we don't think so because, we can still go buy cheap stuff at the dollar store. But the reality is, when you look at the numbers, the math doesn't lie. The wealth class of this country has never been doing better. The working class is on a treadmill that they cannot trip, they cannot fall, they cannot take a breath, or they're going to get shot right off. Because we've got wages that haven't kept up with inflation, we've got healthcare costs that are skyrocketing out of control, and employers who are walking away from healthcare. You got to have skin in the game. And, housing costs are crazy, food costs are crazy, and we're moving away from traditional employment to now you can be your own boss. We're going to do in every industry what the trucking industry did, 30 years ago, which is put all the responsibility on the individual, put all of the risk, all of the labor, all of that on top of the individual, but the profits still go to the head guy. You look at the gig economy that's popping up, there's fertile ground to be aggressive. And this is my hope for Kamala Harris. I say all the time, every time a new president comes in, that it's my hope that they will be the person who returns reward to work, and that we regrow a standard of living in America that we can be proud of, that we want to pass on to our children. I say that every presidential election. This one's a little different for me because I think being a Gen Xer, and I love that, being someone who, grew up kind of like I did, in that generation where, get lost until the streetlights come on. There's a hope that she's going to get stuff done, because that was always our mantle. Don't leave me alone. I'll do it. I'll fix it. We'll get it done. That can-do kind of attitude. Yes, I can take this box and these 3 wheels and I can make something of a vehicle that will jump over that car. Yes, we can do that. For me, this administration, if Kamala Harris wins, this is the one where we hopefully as a country believe again. Believe we can do things again. And then tackle the things that I believe are important. Inequality. labor rights, women's rights, consumer rights, making this a more perfect union, making, I don't know, what's the rhetoric we hear? What's that thing? Oh, yeah, make America great. Make this a place that again, as I grew up believing, if you worked hard and you played by the rules, you got ahead. And then people who didn't play by the rules got punished. That there was equal justice across the board. That's my hope for her. And I know it's a lot bigger than, I hope that they return reward to work. And I think Biden has done that, to be honest. That was my wish for him. And I think the fact that he has put people into positions of authority that have helped workers organize, that have helped wages come up, that has invested in this country in a way that, yes, we're going to get the manufacturing and the chips and the infrastructure and all that we desperately need, but also the jobs that come out of it are going to pay a reasonable wage that people can be proud of, that people can support a family on, that people can retire with dignity on. Because after all, what good is an economy if working people are desperate? And I go back to my daughter. The sad reality is too many people get thrust into a situation, not of their doing or their choosing, but they get thrust into a situation that is harmful, that puts them in peril. And without a backstop, without a helping hand, without assistance, it's chaos. And it's detrimental to families. So for me, this moment is an opportunity. And I've been saying this about the Biden agenda. It has put us on a path that I think is a good thing. It has laid out a vision for the future that I think returns us to a prosperous era. All I hear from Donald Trump and the other side is grievance, anger, and woe is me. If you listen to their rhetoric, you'd think the country was on fire. You would think on every street corner there are people dying of starvation and homeless, and you would think this was a burning hellscape. But the reality is there are problems, but we can solve them. And not with an authoritarian dictator, not with a wannabe, but with us. That's my thought. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Hamilton Nolan's going to be here to share some thoughts on the labor movement getting behind Harris and what that may mean for Republicans vying for working class votes. Back after this.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Wednesday, the United Auto Workers, their international executive board voted to endorse Kamala Harris for president. You may remember they endorsed Joe Biden. So this seems kind of like a no-brainer, right? It should be pretty simple. And it was. Evidently, Kamala Harris actually walked a picket line with UAW members back in 2019. And it's one of those things where you go, that kind of important. Maybe she found Obama's comfortable shoes too, and thought, hey, let's go walk with workers and actually support them. Now the weird thing is I got a bunch of emails from people going, why would they do that? President Trump was, like there's a real actual play by Republicans to gain working class votes, other than just the insanity. And here to share some thoughts on what is behind all of this push by Republicans to attempt to attract union labor after decades of attacking them. That's why I've asked Hamilton Nolan to come talk with us. He's a labor reporter. He's got an incredible must-see, must-read Substack page, How Things Work. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Hamilton, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, man.
So what do you make of this? What do you make of this play? It's been happening on the fringes of the Republican Party for a while. People like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, trying to play footsie, little bits here and there to try and gain working class support. But it seems now there seems to be a larger push to try and get there. Or am I reading this wrong?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's definitely a faction inside of the Republican Party that sees an opportunity to peel off working class votes from the Democratic Party. I think you saw Trump peeling off a certain amount of working class votes, over the past 8 years. And so there's definitely a push within the Republican Party from at least a faction of the party to try to brand itself as a working class party. Now, obviously, the Republican Party hasn't changed its stripes overnight. And I think that mostly the attempt to brand itself as a working class party is it's about as deep as hanging a picture of a guy wearing flannel next to a pickup truck on the wall. That is the Republican, that is their vision of being a working class party. But when you look at the policies, of course, and in particular pro-union policies, which I believe, and I think you believe, are the actual ticket to supporting the working class is strengthening unions. Republican Party is still extremely anti-union, and the quickest way to tell if any particular politician is pro-working class is to ask, do you support the PRO Act, which is the union labor law reform bill?
That's the litmus
test.
And
the Republicans don't.
No, so that's basically the litmus test. If you're not on that list, sorry, I'm not buying it. But you've got a new piece out, and well, it's a couple of days old that I found really important. It's how the working class Republican scam works, because I think it is a scam. I think what you're seeing. And I think the National Review, the very conservative National Review, was absolutely correct in looking at Trump's support of union members as cultural and not ideological. So walk me through this how you see the Republican scam at attracting working people, how that works.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the Republicans see this as an extension of the culture wars, and so what they see is their appeal to whatever their vision of the working class is, which again is always a white guy standing next to a pickup truck, is really an extension of the culture war, as opposed to a policy position that would actually help the working class. And so, when I look at a lot of the stuff being written from the right wing about these policies and about their supposed pro-working class agenda, what I see, first of all, is anti-immigrant sentiment. So when you start talking to these people about supporting the working class, they immediately go to immigration. I mean, I invite anyone who has, relatives who are Republicans who want to talk about being pro-working classes to have these conversations. And one thing you'll notice is that instead of talking about supporting unions, for example, and strengthening worker power, they go immediately to immigration and how immigrants are stealing American jobs and how we need to tighten up border control, So immediately it goes to a place of demonizing immigrants rather than to a place of building worker power by strengthening unions, And the other part of it that is really prominent is the culture war as applied to corporations. And so you'll see, Republicans like Josh Hawley and people like that talking about how they hate big tech, for example, or criticizing Amazon, for example. But they're not criticizing Amazon because Amazon is union busting. They're criticizing Amazon because they say they have these DEI policies or they're a woke corporation. That is the basis of their criticism of corporate power. And that's only about an inch thick, right? That's not a real critique of power and capitalism. And it doesn't do anything to build worker power. It's just a pure extension of the culture war applied to corporations. And so those are the two biggest elements, honestly, of what the Republican Party sees as its appeal to the working class. And anybody who actually cares about building worker power, it's not that hard to see that there is no part of any of that I just described that will actually strengthen the power of working people, raise wages, make unions stronger, increase union density, and all those things that are really the keys to building worker power in this country.
No, their argument is divide and conquer, as opposed to actual solidarity of raising conditions for everyone. That rising, that boat, with the rising tide thing that we keep talking about, that never seems to work out well for working people, as the yachts keep crushing the little vessels that we find ourselves in. But here's the thing: if you watch the political theater that was the RNC, they did dance out a couple labor leaders. There were a couple people who, they trotted out and, let them, give a little spiel and patted them on the head and sent them away as a way of saying, hey, look, they like us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in the union world, you have, the police unions and the border patrol unions that have always been historically Republican. And then this year, they got Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters to come out and speak at the RNC, which was a big PR coup for the Republican Party to get that guy on stage.
Yep.
And, I've had plenty of conversations about this, and I'm sure you have, and a lot of people have. And what you hear sort of from people who defend Sean O'Brien's decision to do that is typically people saying, it's important that unions not be a tool of the Democratic Party. It's important that unions talk to everybody and maintain open lines of communication and stuff like that. And, sure, of course, like every union that operates in DC and operates politically will talk to anybody who can help them on their issues. I mean, it's always been like that. So that's a no-brainer. But I think what those people don't realize is that the RNC is a TV event that exists to get Donald Trump elected. That is the purpose of the RNC. So it's one thing to say, hey, we'll talk to people on both sides of the aisle to support our issues. It's a very, very different thing to appear on stage at the RNC and give a speech, because the function of Sean O'Brien giving that speech is to help Donald Trump get elected. No matter what he says in his speech, no matter what he tells you, by being there and by appearing on that stage, he is contributing to Donald Trump getting elected and contributing to the lie that the Republican Party is telling about branding itself as a working class party. And that is the reason why it was foolish of him to appear on that stage, even if you think that unions should be talking to both sides of the aisle.
No, as I said from the beginning, you're going to remember that he was there, not what he said. And the fact that he was there is a tacit endorsement of Donald Trump by the union that he represents. So it was a bad strategic move from the beginning. And I said that from the beginning, and I stand by it. But you still have people who are going, look, this outreach that O'Brien's doing, because I have a lot of my Teamster buddies who are saying, look, he's changing the Republican Party by reaching out, and they're walking and they're talking, and him and Mark Wayne Mullen have a love now. They're not fighting. Josh Hawley's heart changed, grew 3 sizes too large on right to work, changed all of this. He's changing things. What do you say to that?
I mean, a couple things. First of all, when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, you saw a whole procession of people going to Trump Tower after he got elected and kissing the ring. And all of those people thought, hey, even if we're not traditional allies, we're going to get on the good side of Donald Trump. And how did that turn out? It turned out horribly. He stabbed everybody in the back. His word is worth 0. He stabs people in the back. If you don't know that Donald Trump stabs people in the back by now, you're an idiot. So one thing is, even strategically speaking, that is a bad strategy. And, the other thing I would say is the Teamsters endorsed Reagan, right? The Teamsters endorsed Ronald Reagan in 1980. So it's not unprecedented that the Teamsters have made bad political endorsements, but,
I can justify that one, though, Hamilton. I can go back to 1980 and justify that because Carter signed deregulation. Now, understand, it was the most bipartisan piece of legislation that I can find. You only had 13 House members vote against the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, and 20 of the 100 senators vote against it. But Carter eventually signed it, and that was the argument that the whole push to deregulation, which decimated the trucking industry and harmed the Teamsters. I can make something of an argument of that. I cannot make any argument for the Teamsters looking at Donald Trump, who did nothing on the Butch-Lewis Act, and you've got Joe Biden, who bailed out their pension. It just, there's no place for it.
Biden did everything that the Teamsters wanted, and he's getting stabbed in the back. And the only point I was going to make about Reagan was that even if it seemed rational at the time, and even if people thought it was a good move at the time, look at the fallout from the Ronald Reagan era. We're still living, 45 years later in the economic fallout of what Ronald Reagan brought in with him, and the age of inequality that began and really supercharged during that Reagan era. So you play footsie with these people who are bad people, and bad things can happen that will ripple for generations down the road. And that is even more true with somebody like Donald Trump.
No, I'm 100% with you. It's like buying an axe murderer a sharpening kit for their birthday. It's not going to end well for you. And this is kind of where we are in this moment. So looking at the new energy that we're seeing coming out of the Democratic Party as Joe Biden has chosen to step aside, Kamala Harris has gotten a really nice honeymoon bump. The unions are actively pushing in the same direction here. Any thoughts on what we're seeing before us?
Yeah, it's interesting because Kamala Harris is a little bit of a blank slate, and I think that's why you're seeing so much sort of jockeying by everybody to be like, who is she going to get in line with? I mean, who is really going to have her ear? Biden, obviously, whatever you think about Biden, unions did have the ear of the White House as Biden was president. So everybody is kind of scrambling right now to be like, where is she going to fall? And I think, I've talked to some union people from California who worked with her, when she was coming up in that state. And everybody, basically it seems like she's kind of a standard issue Democrat who's always had good relationship with unions, good relationship with SEIU. The unions are doing a lot right now to both, I think, get on her good side, but also to kind of feel out where she is on things and get commitments from her on issues that they had commitments from Biden on, and to sort of make sure that she carries those things forward. And I haven't seen any bad, any terrible indications from her so far. So it's obviously still early, and she's in a little bit of a honeymoon phase right now, but so far so good.
Right.
And, bigger picture being Biden was not capable of winning and was going to get whipped. So I think just the fact of having a candidate who might be able to win is really given labor and everybody else a lot of energy right now.
Well, for me, it was simpler than that. We need a candidate who can deliver the punchline. There's a lot of really good material for this administration. They've done a lot of good things, in my view, but you got to be able to talk about it. You got to be able to say, hey, look what we did. We got to be able to take that stupid sticker that they were putting all over gas pumps and say, yeah, I did that. And I don't think President Biden had the ability to do that. I think she will. So, in this moment, do unions feel that, do you think that, she's going to be the answer, or is it that the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 thing is pretty detailed in the fact that they want to destroy labor unions. They want to undo basically the 20th century and return us back to the old days of the Lochner era. Do you see that, or do you see it differently?
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, I went to a conference a few weeks ago in D.C., the National Conservatism Conference, which is sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, and what they are very open about the agenda. As one of the reasons why Project 2025 got to be such a big thing in the news is that you can read it all. It's there, you can read it. And I wrote a piece, months ago about what it meant for labor, and as you said, it's like, they are going to systematically decimate and roll back every single piece of progress that the labor movement has made under Joe Biden and way before that, if possible. And so they're very open about that agenda. And so there's no question that another Trump administration is really, really going to suck for labor unions, and by extension, and by weakening the power of unions, is going to suck for working people and is going to empower corporations. I mean, it is completely clear, and there's a 900-page document there. And also they want to outlaw pornography and a ton of other insane things. So, no matter how you feel about Kamala Harris, and a lot of people on the left, were never really big fans of Kamala Harris, including me, but given the choice that we have, it's a very, very clear choice right now where labor is going to come out.
Yeah,
better.
it's the Eddie Izzard frame, cake or death.
Right.
It seems like a fairly simple choice.
Exactly.
There you go. Hamilton, I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you. Hope folks will check out your Substack page, How Things Work. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Hamilton, Nolan, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you believe that the Republicans truly have had a change of heart? Do you believe that Josh Hawley's heart grew 3 sizes too big? Or is it an election year and he's up for re-election against a tough candidate? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Want to hear what you think. Back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. Frank Little, an activist for the Industrial Workers of the World, or Wobblies, was lynched near Butte, Montana. His beaten body was found hung off a railroad trestle. On it was pinned a disturbing note. It read, quote, "Others take notice. First and last warning. 3777 LDCSSWT. The numbers were the measurement of a grave. Each letter was the initial of a union organizer. The letter L for Frank Little was circled. The warning was clear. Union organizers leave town or die. Butte was copper mining country, and efforts to unionize the miners had turned the area into a battleground. Frank had arrived that July to help in the efforts to support striking miners. Frank Little was a leader of the IWW with experience organizing free speech campaigns, lumberjacks, and miners. Although not much is known of his early life, it is thought his mother was Cherokee and his father was a Quaker. He organized the wives of the miners to join in the pickets and helped build solidarity between the multiple unions that organized in the area. The Anaconda Mining Company took note of his presence, but could not find a legal means to stop him. Then, early on that fateful day, men came to his boarding house. They claimed they were police officers. They gagged Little and stuffed him into a car. They beat him and drug him through part of town tied to the car bumper. And it was at the county line where they hung Frank Little's body. News of the atrocity spread far and wide. Thousands attended the funeral. Not surprisingly, the authorities never found his murderers. Some doubt they ever tried. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So interesting point that Hamilton made. You know, if Republicans truly are going to be the party of the working class, if their hearts have truly grown, and they really have had this grand epiphany, the moment of clarity that, hey, this is where we're going to be the party of the working class. The PRO Act seems to be the litmus test of the day. But understand, looking to the 20th century, because I've been saying for a long time, these are the folks who want to repeal the 20th century. Hated it. Wasn't good for business. Wasn't great for the robber barons. And we've got new ones. So if they're not signing on to the PRO Act, would they have signed on to the Fair Labor Standards Act of 38? That created a minimum wage that they haven't allowed to be increased in over 15 years. That mandated overtime after 40 hours that they want to change in their Project 2025 to overtime after, 160 a month? Child labor. It restricted child labor, banned child labor in most cases, which now we're seeing Republican states going back after and going, no, they got little hands, can do little work. And look, they're not going to get an education anyway. Just get them out there, and because we're addicted to the cheap labor. You know, would they have at all supported the right of workers to organize with the National Labor Relations Act? Because understand, their Republican brethren of the past did not. Not in the numbers that you would need today, because we need 60 votes to get anything done in the Senate today. But the idea of workers having the ability to organize in collective bargaining, and that a government should encourage that collective bargaining so that you have localized problem solving, that's revolutionary. Do you think today's Republican Party would believe in it? Do you believe today's Republican Party would vote for something like OSHA? The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, not 1930s, 1970. I was alive then. I was very small, but I was still alive. Do you think you could get that kind of support to protect workers in the workplace, to do the incredible things that OSHA has done over the years? Do you really think that this Republican Party, who in their Project 2025, very clear, want to gut all of this stuff? Again, there's what they say, what the political theater is, what the song and dance, what all that is, and then there's what they're doing. And what they've done over the years, they've weakened every protection for workers, and, well, ultimately created a diminished standard of living. You go back to 93, when the Family Medical Leave Act was passed. Do you think we could do that? Now, and look, that was seriously handicapped, which is a weird way of putting that. But the FMLA just gives people 12 weeks of unpaid leave to take care of a problem. Not paid, unpaid. And the only thing is you go, well, an employer can't fire them. But the employer has to have 75 employees or more. Sorry. I mean, you go through this stuff and you go, could that have passed? And that was only, most of our lifetimes ago. And then you get to the other stuff, like we've talked about the prevailing wage laws, the Davis-Bacon Act. We've talked about all of this stuff over the years that Republicans have been very clear. They don't want law. They don't want project labor agreements. They don't want prevailing wage. None of this stuff. And look, 1931, you passed the Davis-Bacon Act. Oddly enough, Republicans pushed that. Because you could argue it was racist at the beginning, but it did create a highly localized building trades. And what do they want to do with it now? Well, Project 2025 says they want to repeal it. They want to do away with it. They want to ban project labor agreements. They want to do away with all of this stuff and make desperation the rule of the day. And look, there's a whole bunch of things that they want to go and completely gut. For instance, I was just talking to somebody the other day about the WARN Act, the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act of 1988. 1988, a Republican was in the White House, signed this into law. And all this does is say, look, if you're gonna close your business down, if you're gonna lay off a number of employees, you got to give them some notice. You got to tell them. They just can't show up to work one day and go, looks like the gates are closed. You've got to have some kind of notification and let the community know so that everyone doesn't suffer. Do you think that could pass? Something that simple? And the answer is no. None of this stuff passes with today's Republican Party. None of this stuff gets the number of votes needed to get this on a president's desk. Doesn't happen. And all of these things are things that we take for granted every day. All of these things that our grandparents and great-grandparents organized and fought, bled, and died for, they want to destroy right now. And they're not shy about it. They're not dancing around the bush. They're not trying to hide it. They've written it down. It's in a 900-page document that you don't even have to read the whole thing. You can do keyword searches, and it will take you right to the paragraph, and you can read right there what their vision for America is. And you've heard me talk about the Lochner era before. The idea that if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages and deplorable conditions, well, that's your liberty. It's your freedom. It's your right. That if you and the employer say, yeah, we're going to work 100 hours a week for $1 an hour, you made your deal. That's where they want to take us back to. So government can pass no minimum wage laws, can pass no maximum hour laws, no safe working conditions, no workman's comp. Do you think workers' compensation today would get through a Republican legislature in this country? The answer is no way in a highway to you know where. So this idea, this fantasy, this myth, this unicorn of a Republican who cares about labor, I gotta tell you is, let's go misguided at best. There's a lot of other things, but FCC precludes me from expressing my true and honest feelings. But this election right here, is about what kind of future we're going to have. Are we going to have a future where if you work hard and play by the rules, you can get ahead? Or are we going to have a future of, what was the Hobbesian thing? Life is brutish, desperate and short, however that went. Is that where we're heading back to? And is that what we want? And I know we're divided and pitted against each other over immigration or someone dressing funny or standing or sitting, going to the bathroom. I don't know. They do a nice job of throwing nonsense at us while we don't actually fight for common sense, which is, hey, how do we ensure we can put food on the table, keep a roof over our families' heads, and have a better tomorrow? For me, that's what these elections are about. It's not about the cult of personality. I know Donald Trump said, Kamala Harris has turned black. Don't care. I want to know what she's going to do to make lives better. What's she going to do to give my kids the opportunity to lead at least the life that I've been able to lead? I think that's all we should want. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. For video, over at freespeech.org. Don't miss that. And as always, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.